Hi, everybody. Susan Storm here with Denzel Mensah, and we are continuing what we started last week. Last week, we talked about what we love about the introverted Myers-Briggs personality type, and today we're going to be talking about what we love about the 8 extroverted Myers-Briggs personality types. And I'm excited to see that Cody is in the comments because he has ENTP preferences, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. So we have an extrovert here, and also Denzel. Can you tell people about yourself, as you are the extrovert in this stream?
This is true. So, what's up, everyone? My name is Denzel Mensah. I'm a certified life personal development and relationship coach. I'm an ENFJ, 911, social sexual. I have my own YouTube channel as well. You can find that underneath my name, Denzel Mensah. And yeah, I like to talk about spirituality. I like to talk about anything having to do with interpersonal dynamics. I like philosophy. I like talking about personality psychology, of course. And yeah, I'm just excited to be here, per usual.
Awesome. Thank you, Denzel. So as you are the resident extrovert, I'm going to ask you to tell us which personality type we should start with today.
Okay. Well,
I
we're
picked last
definitely
week.
gonna save the FE DOMs for last because they want to hear more about their friends.
Okay.
So let's talk about the ones that might want to hear more about themselves first. I'm just kidding. Or them. The FI users. No, I'm kidding. ESFP.
All
Since
right.
yeah, SE, they want to jump right into it. Let's give it to them.
That makes sense. So, and also, if you're watching, if you're just tuning in, hi, Carlos. Welcome. We're glad you're here. Great to have an ISFJ here. If you're just tuning in and you have questions about a particular personality type that we're talking about, feel free to jump right in and ask that question in the chat. We want this to be an interactive experience. So if you have a thought, don't feel like you have to wait till the end. Just jump right in and let us know, and we'll try to answer that as quickly as we can. So let's start with ESFP. ESFP is one of the types that I love so much. One of my closest friends here is an ESFP, Savannah, if you're watching. Um, and ESFPs, one of the things I love about them is how unabashedly real they are, in a way that I consider extremely brave. And sorry, my voice is kind of echoing back a little bit. Do you have headphones by any chance?
Oh yeah, I do. Let me a second to mute and come.
Sorry about that. So ESFPs are extremely authentic, and because they're so real and they're so 100% themselves, they give other people the permission, just by nature of being that, they give other people the permission to be that as well. And they're also very what's the word? Like understanding in a way that, okay, so I'm trying to think of how to just describe the difference between how a feeling perceiver and a feeling judge are understanding. For as an example, I was going on a trip with this ESFP that I'm friends with, and I was like, oh no, I had really bad asthma at the time. And I was like, I don't want to have an asthma attack in the middle of this trip. It's going to go really bad. It'll be really embarrassing. And she was like, that's all right. If it happens to you, I'll just pretend I'm having an asthma attack too, and we'll just like be fine. And she was like, it went further than that, but she basically described doing this embarrassing thing with me just to make me feel not embarrassed. And it was like, if you're going to, if something happens to you that's embarrassing, I'm going to embarrass myself too. Only it wouldn't really embarrass her, but it was like, that's exactly what I needed to hear. And I find that ESFPs are really good at that, at just like taking the absurdity of life in hand and going with it and making it fun, making people laugh, and making you feel not so crazy for, I don't know, being different. They also are very adventurous, which I love. They're up for anything. If you have a great idea about a trip you want to take or some last minute spontaneous activity you want to do, they're usually up for it. They know how to make life fun. I had a birthday party for my 7-year-old last October, and there was an ESFP mom there. And I swear she was the most fun mom I'd ever seen at anything. She was like jumping on the trampoline with the kids. She was, we just being really exciting and enthusiastic. And she was like, I don't feel like ESFPs let go of their inner child as quickly as certain other types do. And they're just great at making everything fun. They're great at amping up the energy of things. And they do have that conviction and that empathy. They're also very willing to fight for what they believe in, even if other people don't agree with them. I found that ESFPs don't mind being different, don't mind being the bad guys as much as certain other types do, if they're defending a cause that really matters to them. And that's something that I really, really appreciate about this type. What about you, Denzel?
Yeah, I think the first thing that I would say about ESFPs is that they're probably arguably the least judgmental personality type. I think that because they see things so much for what it is and they want to try everything pretty much, like, and they just have so much of a carefree live let live type of attitude most of the time, then they really just want to have a good time. They want to enjoy life. They really are capable of making any moment magic in a way, like actually fun and engaging. And they often say what's on their mind, and it's usually what everybody else is thinking, but is afraid to say. And they can do it in a way that doesn't always like hurt people's feelings and stuff like that. Sometimes it does, but usually it's like you're just like they say it in such a funny way that's just like, oh man, like without ESFPs, there would be significantly less laughter in the world. And we appreciate them for that. But then at the same time, they also have a lot of depth. And I'm not just saying that because, well, actually, no, like I am saying it. I'm not just saying it because people don't really attribute it to that, but it's because it's true. And people don't actually say much about the ESFP's depth. I know quite a few ESFPs. I know a lot of ESFPs that don't really like to go into what we would call deeper things, but I know enough ESFPs as well who actually, even though they prefer to, talk about maybe like things that are like not really what we would call as deep all the time, they're very capable of getting there. And usually when they are going into those realms, they can express it through their art. They're very good at being able to explore a lot of the things that intuitives talk about, but in an actual embodying type of way. Like an intuitive might spend hours, days, months, like actually like reading about magic and tarot and all these other things before they finally start like, okay, now I'm going to start practicing it and etc. Whereas like the ESFP just jumps right into it and learns by doing. And so they actually get a lot of the experience from there. And so they're often able to speak to you right from directly their experiences that they're having. I think that ESFPs are also very good at being able to ignite passion in other people. If they get really upset about something, if they feel very passionate, they will fiercely protect you, and they will also make sure that they're protecting themselves as well. They're good at being able to stay in alignment with their values. They're very good at evoking emotion. Like they make some of the best artists, the best types of dancers. I think of like Bruno Mars when I think of ESFP. If we're thinking of, anime, I'm thinking of Eren Yeager. Like he was very assertive, very aggressive, and all of that. Sometimes they can be impulsive, but at the same time, it's like they actually deeply care. Eren Yeager from Attack on Titan, by the way. And there are just so many funny ESFPs out there. I think of Kevin Hart as well, but then you also have like incredibly talented ones like Whitney Houston. I believe that she was an ESFP. And there's so much that can be said about that personality type, the way that they're able to bring to life a lot of the things that are usually just buried in our subconscious. They're able to put it into dance. They're able to put it into their art in some way, shape, or form. They're able to embody it. When we're afraid to jump into things first, they're the ones who are jumping into it before we do, and then helping encourage the rest of us to jump into it as well.
Thank you, Denzel. That was perfect. I completely agree about them being uses the word like fierce protectors. Like if you are on an ESFP's good side, if they say they like you, they really like you. They are not actually going. That's one thing I really like about ESFPs is how they're not going to tell you something they don't mean unless they're just like, okay, they can get caught up in a mood or be like, yeah, let's like blow all our money and like buy plane flights to Hawaii or something. And then the next day be like, actually, maybe that's not such a good idea. That kind of impulsive like thinking, or they might make jokes that they later regret or something like that. But as far as like what they like and value, they're not going to like make you believe something that isn't true just to like smooth over the situation. Like if an ESFP says that you are their friend, you are their friend. And they're going to stick by you, and they also will defend you from bullies. Like ESFPs, every ESFP I've known is just itching for a chance to put a bully in their place. Like they like defending people from jerks and things like that. And they're very mentally quick as well. It's very frustrating because I know a lot of ESFPs who I actually think are some incredibly wildly intelligent people, but they didn't necessarily excel in school. And so they think of themselves as not being very smart when actually they're incredibly smart. They just didn't like many SE-DOMs or ESFPs and ESTPs, they hate sitting still, especially when they're children. And so school is a lot about sitting still and rote memorization and things that, not getting up and doing things and being immersed in your environment. And that situation often is very frustrating for ESFPs and ESTPs. And so sometimes ESFPs don't technically perform well in school, but then they actually are wildly creative and intelligent, but it's not recognized. And so that's something that I think I feel very strongly about, because I've seen ESFPs who performed poorly in school, but then they were like amazing surgeons because they think well on their feet and on the job. And all the ESFPs I've known, they have this quick humor, this very quick ability to solve problems, even very quick way of getting what's going on with people emotionally. So they can read when people are being fake with them very, very fast. And they can read people's motivations, and whether someone's sad and pretending to be happy, they can read that kind of stuff really quickly as well. And I just think I'm just really impressed by them whenever I'm with them. And so, yeah, definitely, if you can't tell, one of my favorite types. So I'm glad we started with them. Thank you, Denzel.
Yeah, I think that they're like probably one of the, I think I also heard that not only are they the least judgmental type, again, that's not saying that you'll never run into a judgmental ESFP. Even if they are judging you, it's usually like about something small, like, oh, what you're wearing. But if it's like, oh my gosh, I did this really crazy, horrible thing, or like literally, oh, I did cocaine, like something as crazy as that, it's like, oh, wow, well, shoot me next. Or it's like, oh, did you have fun? Like they're literally that type of person, whereas like maybe some other types, that's bad. You know what I mean? So yeah, like they're not only like the least judgmental, generally speaking, but then also the most liked. So ESFPs, we love y'all, and y'all deserve more love in the type community.
Absolutely. I would love to see more ESFPs. I actually just sent out this survey. I don't know that I've been sending it out in groups over the last couple of weeks, and it's a love and support survey. I'm trying to get a read on, how the 16 personality types best receive love, give love, how they feel about compliments, gifts, and all these kinds of things. And I have so few ESFP and ESTP responses, and also ENTJs. So if you're watching this and you're an ESFP, an ESTP, or an ENTJ, send me an email and I'll get you that survey, because I really need more responses so I can get some good analysis done on your types. Also, welcome Monica, Kibo, Cody, Carlos. Thank you so much for being here, you guys. I'm glad to have another extrovert on here, another ENFJ. I'm not an ENFJ, but Denzel is. Thank you for being here. And with that, should we jump into the ESTP personality types?
I would say ENFP.
Oh, okay.
We should do all the FI first.
All right, so we'll go by judging function then. All right. So a lot of the things I love about ESFPs, can be moved over also to ENFPs. I mean, they are very protective of the underdog. They cannot stand bullying. If they say they like you, they like you. They're very real. They're very authentic. They are very adventurous. They have a lot. They make life fun and exciting. What's different about ENFPs is these people are going to be the great brainstormers, idea generators. I mean, not that ESFPs can't brainstorm or generate ideas. I feel like ESFPs generate opportunities, and ENFPs are more about generating ideas. And so you can get in a really intense conversation with an ENFP where say you're talking about what does love really mean, and all of a sudden they're throwing out, it could mean this and this and this, and here's an example from this movie, and here's this thing I read here, but here's also my understanding of it, and they're bringing in like all these possibilities and different connections and interpretations of it. And I think that's something that they can get really theoretical, and of course being ENPs they can get theoretical, but in a way that allows you to see something maybe you've looked at one way your whole life in a completely new way. Like maybe your understanding of, I don't know, the meaning of a holiday or something has always been under this traditional context. But then they're like, oh, well, I do it this way. I celebrate this completely different way. And then I know, but I've also thought of doing it this other way. And all of a sudden you're at the end of the conversation, you're like, wow, I had no idea. Now I'm looking at this the meaning of this holiday in a totally different way. But they can do that with everything, is hypothesize various ways of looking at it that are different, different possibilities of ways you could do something. They're good problem solvers sometimes in chaotic situations, or if you feel like, oh, there's no hope, like say your business collapses and you just feel like giving up, an ENFP might be like, look at these things you can do. What can you build off these? Because they use their extroverted thinking and their extroverted intuition to generate all these possibilities, and then also give you, for a few steps to take to move yourself towards those possibilities. So I feel like ENFPs are great people when, opening windows that you didn't think were there in the first place, so you can explore different possibilities. I mean, Walt Disney, one of my favorite people ever, I think he was an ENFP. He's all about inspiring people, showing the people the power of imagination. And that's something that I think ENFPs are great at, is they believe in their imagination. They don't think your imaginative ideas are silly. They're not going to dismiss you or put you down if you're like, oh, I have this idea, and maybe other people would laugh at it, but they would encourage you to pursue it. And I think because they have that love of imagination, that love of possibility, that love of creativity, they are wonderful at also relating to children and seeing the potential in children. And I've noticed that every ENFP I've known has had like a deep love of children and love of the potential and the creativity and the childlike wonder that children have. And that's something I also really appreciate. All right, Denzel, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I agree with everything that you said. And I would say the biggest thing that I've noticed for ENFPs is that they are looking for the outlier. Like, again, like I think of The Greatest Showman, Barnum from The Greatest Showman, and the way that he was able to identify, like he created the circus by looking at like, yo, who is new? Who has been ostracized from society for being weird, peculiar in any type of way? Because the ENFPs are often able to relate to that, and they don't want to go by what's already been established anyway. They're trying to figure out like what's going to become the new norm. Like, okay, well, who says that this is normal? And even then, who says that normal is good? If you are a bearded lady, then that's pretty cool. We should celebrate that, and we should celebrate this, and we should celebrate that. Let's make a circus, and they find those who have been left out, and then they bring them in. Now, of course, not every ENFP is out there going looking for a bearded lady of some sort, but you can see the patterns from that, as in like they're looking often for the people who are thinking very differently. They're looking for people who are like looking at things in a novel way, because they themselves also are looking at things in a very novel way, leading with extroverted intuition. They are very good at being able to show people different ways of living. They are the ones who are usually like traveling a lot of times and seeing how the world operates in many different ways. And so then it's like, yeah, you guys do this like this in the US, but when I went to Asia, they actually did it like this. And then when I went to Africa, they did it like this. And then when I went to Japan, and they also did it like this. And they know all of these different ways to like live and express yourself, and to live and to like be authentic in a way that it's like almost nothing is really like weird to them, while still also holding their convictions that they hold very truly, like close to them. And even though they can become a lot more latched to their values and their morals and convictions, and more vocal about them than say the SFP types usually are, they also do this because they spend a lot more time like researching it. Like, I think that that's another thing. Like SFPs, they can tend to be a lot more like lax, and not really like be as loud with their values and convictions and stuff like that, and just embodying it silently. But for NFPs, they spend so much time like thinking about the philosophies behind it and really getting into the nitty gritty of it all, that it's like, I think that I'm blessing the world, and I'm trying to bless the world by showing them like, hey, I like, almost like they're trying to guide the world with the types of convictions that we should have, because they took the time to go into these dark areas to be able to really come out and be like, hey, I went where most people probably don't want to go emotionally, and I'm here to tell you guys that this is why, this is what it is. And so they can often be, memed out as like la 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 types, and there are a lot of like la 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 types of like ENFPs, but then you also have ENFPs that are like Steve Jobs, yeah, Steve Jobs, dude who made the iPhone and everything like that. I believe that he's an ENFP, and he had quite the imagination to really like think about it. Now, of course, like as he had the imagination, everything, he had the ideas, and then he was able to find people to be able to help him. Like, I think that it was Wozniak who really like put the ideas into action, but it was Steve Jobs who was like, hey, let's do this, let's do that. Like, everybody's always had things like this. How about what if we do it differently this time? Which is, the NE always like reinventing the wheel in some way. And they really know how to like ignite passion, and how to, they are the types that are really going to tell you to go and live your authentic life, probably more than any other type. Like when you think of Robin Williams, I think I'm right. Yeah, Robin Williams. But I was also thinking of dang, I'm trying to remember his name. He's really the big guy, kind of loud. Tony Robbins. Is it
Uh,
Robin Williams and Tony Robbins? I think it's Tony
I've
Robbins.
heard that that inspirational speaker guy,
Yeah.
like kind of muscular dude.
Yeah, that guy.
I think
Yeah.
a lot of people type him as ENFP. I couldn't say, but that's what I hear.
Yeah, I believe that he's an ENFP as well. I think a lot of people try to say he's ENFJ, and I mean he's great. He's really great, but I think that he's actually way more NEFI, and he really gets into people's FI, and he allows like this. It's almost like a tuning fork where he like really gets into the FI of other people, and he like calibrates it in a certain way. So I think that, like when you really pay attention to people like him, Russell Brand, like you really start to see like how rich ENFPs really make every day, like in the philosophical, moral type of realm too. And I think that they really help us with seeing the world with fresh eyes. They keep a lot of the excitement and things in our world like moving forward, while also reminding us of our past. And I think that's what Disney World even is, like seeing how beautiful the future is, while still also being able to remember like where the past, our history has been able to provide that for our future. So yeah, ENFPs, absolutely amazing.
Thank you, Denzel. Yeah, I was like, there was some was it Steve Jobs? I've never thought of him as ENFP before. Now I'm gonna have to go watch some interviews, because I always thought he was more like I always heard like INTJ for him, and then I remember watching a movie of him, and I was like, oh, that could make sense. But I will have to go watch interviews now, because I'm super curious if I see ENFP too.
Yeah. Oh, and Gary Vaynerchuk too. I know he's another one that's often typed as ENFJ. I really, really believe that he's actually ENFP. And you can see Gary Vaynerchuk.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I could see
like
that.
How he's able to flip everything. Like, hey, no, like you see how things are this way, but like you can reimagine it this way, and you can reimagine it this way, and like he really is able to tap into certain people. He's all about like expressing his authentic self. Kanye, I know that he's very controversial, but he really revolutionized so much in the music industry. So yeah, there's a lot of great examples out there of ENFPs. Y'all are in great company.
Yeah, absolutely. I love everything you said, and yeah, I've got some ENFPs who are gonna be watching today, and I think they're gonna be happy about that. All right, so let's move to now. Should we move to the ESTPs?
Yeah, sure. I was teasing about the FI thing, but yes.
No. It's good. It's good. I think that's a great way to start. And then ESTPs is awesome to go next because they will get impatient with sitting and watching everyone all the preliminary stuff. So ESTPs, well, I'm married to one, so there's a lot of great things I can say because otherwise I wouldn't have been married for almost 12 years to one. But one of the things that I really love about ESTPs is I do believe that they actually want to be heroes. Like they look at those Marvel heroes and things like that, and they think, yeah, I could do that. But they actually do have a desire to make an impact in the world, and not just for themselves, but to help people. I've noticed that if you need someone in a crisis to have your back, an ESTP is absolutely the person you'd want. I mean, they are phenomenal at showing up, at thinking clearly, at troubleshooting on the spot with lots of chaos going on around them and being able to just like handle things. And that's something that, you know, as an INTJ, I am not as good at doing that. I mean, if you give me a little time, I can come up with a strategy or a plan, but on the spot, like, you know, if you get in a car accident, for example, and everything's chaotic and there's drivers all around you and you're trying to figure out what to do. So an ESTP is who you would want on hand to be like, all right, we're going to do this, and immediately jump into action. I remember one time my husband ESTP was driving and there was an accident. He immediately pulled over, raced across the interstate, which literally had like 3 lanes of traffic, and went to check on, you know, the people in the car. And that's the kind of thing, like if there's, you know, if he's by himself and he sees someone on the side of the road that has a problem with their car, he's going to jump out and help. And I found that ESTPs are actually really good at that kind of immediate, practical, hands-on helping. And I think that that's, you know, a lot of people, they think, oh, thinkers, they're not as nice as feelers and stuff like that. You know, if you look at like villains in movies, they're almost always typed as thinking types. And what I think is crazy is that some of the nicest and kindest people I've known have been thinkers. I mean, I think feelers can be wonderful people as well. Don't get me wrong. I just think that your T or F, thinking or feeling preference, does not indicate how kind you actually are. And I've definitely seen ESTPs jump into the fray when there's a crisis and help out, even at considerable risk to themselves, even if it could like get in the way of their daily schedule. You know, they want to help. And I also think they're great at troubleshooting. And they have a certain patience for it that, you know, in contrast to like TJs that can be like get kind of impatient with troubleshooting when something's getting in the way of their plan. I find that any kind of thinking perceiver is much better at that. I do find that ESTPs are great at understanding the components of how things work, whether it's a car engine, a computer, a hard drive, or whatever it is. They like figuring out how those things work. The ESTPs, I know they're always in the middle of building something. I feel like they almost always have something in their like garage or workshop that they're like, oh, I'm in the middle of building this thing. And they usually have these innovative ways that they are building as well. There's a creativity to extroverted sensing that I don't think is given enough credit in the type community. We often kind of put creativity, we ascribe it to intuition, but I think there's a hands-on, very practical creativity that ESTPs bring. For example, my husband is thinking of making a game table, right? Because we play a lot of board games. But he's not just going to make a regular one like you would find anyone else making. He's like, no, I'm looking at how we could put piano hinges on the edges so that we could pull down this tray, basically, there you could put your little pieces so no one else would see them. Like this kind of ability to see, we could make this better, we could improve on something. What is a hands-on way we could do it? And then, of course, he's got the diagrams and measurements, and he's explaining to me all the nuts and bolts of how this would work. And me being who I am, I'm like, if you know how to do it, that's great. I don't understand all this stuff you're saying, but if you get it, perfect. ESTPs are great at understanding how things work, you know, like how any object works. And they have a great memory for details also. We often talk about memory being with SJ types, but I feel like STP types, in my experience, have been incredible at remembering accurately things they've read in the past, things they've seen in the past, and things they've experienced. And yeah, they're funny, they're charming, they like to be liked, and they're a lot of fun to be around. So there's some of my thoughts on ESTPs. I could go on for a lot longer, but now it's your turn.
Yeah, no, ESTPs are absolutely incredible. I think that it was funny that you said the superhero thing because they kind of are like they have that same kind of like that SEFE sort of outgoingness, like jumping into action and wanting to help people at the same time, and doing it in a practical manner. I think that also for ESTPs, they're really good at handling things as quickly as possible in the moment in a rational way. So when a crisis like happens, then if you watch like how they operate, they're generally very good at being able to be like, okay, like I'm not going to let emotions get to me, but I'm actually being tapped into what's going on right now. They're very good also at being resourceful. I think that for ESTPs, something that I've noticed that's a pattern for them is that although they're able to dream big, they're also very good at keeping it in a way, like keeping it practical in a way. Like I've interviewed a few ESTPs on my channel. I've talked to a whole bunch of them, and they're really good at being able to be like, yo, like shoot big, but make sure that you also know like this is like the grounded way to be able to like actually get there. You know, like because they're really trying to actually make whatever you're shooting for happen. And so if they feel as if they themselves or you are shooting somewhere that is probably like unattainable, then sometimes they might shoot you down like just right away. But you know, usually ESTPs who have like worked on their tact a lot more, they're really good at being able to be like, well, I feel like you should actually probably start by doing this because that's a lot more like attainable, like right then and there. And then from there you can move on to this, and then boom, boom, boom. And I think ESTPs are also really great at being able to they're comedic, like they're really good at just saying things again for what it is, kind of like with the ESFP, but they're saying what makes sense to them. And on top of that, a lot of times they're addressing a lot of the things that society has already like deemed as bad or whatever, but they're the ones who are usually being like, oh, so then why this or why that? And they're like poking at the societal conventional norms that we have so they can like point out like, see, this doesn't make any sense. I think of I just finished watching My Hero Academia, and so I think of like characters such as like Hawks from My Hero Academia. I believe that he was an ESTP. I know that a lot of people think of him as an ENTP, and I think it's usually because we don't attribute SE dominance like to actually be like witty and clever and stuff like that. I think also like the same thing can go to the movie Fight Club. If we think about Tyler Durden, I think is his name.
Durden.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think another type that people used to like usually say is like, oh, like ENTP maybe, but then he's really like SE Dom. It's like, and he's using NI even though it's like an inferior function. It's integrated in a way that he's able, but he's embodying all of it. And a lot of the intuitive things that we're actually hearing him say is really his TI. And we don't often like see TI in that sense. Like we often think that ESTPs are just using TI to like maybe pick things apart or like measure out like how far to like throw a basketball or something like that. But I've talked to a lot of like ESTPs who are like really, really good at being able to break things down and explain certain concepts in a way that's actually practical and like will make sense because they want to get to the depth of it all. And then it can get into very abstract and philosophical territory. But in actuality, they're really bringing it to a more practical territory and they're breaking things down into a very granular type of way. And I think that they're usually like one of the, if not probably like, yeah, no, they're definitely in the top coolest, like stereotypically. Again, like they usually have like a really good like level head. They usually are very like stylish. They're usually people who know how to operate in certain contexts. And yeah, they just like to have a good time. They're pretty likable. They make the jokes that a lot of people aren't able to make, but they can get away with it. They're very good with their hands, and yeah, they just love to have like a good time.
Thank you, Denzel. I appreciate that. I think that yeah, like fun adventure, excitement, but also I find that when I'm looking at ESTP content online, a lot of it is just focusing on, oh, they're the party animals or the thrill seekers. They're, and I think a lot of that undermines how intelligent they can actually be. Like what you were saying, they don't just apply their thinking to how they can throw a basketball in a hoop at the right time. Like they can apply it to so many different things, which is why I think that I read somewhere, I don't know if it's an MBTI manual or not, but that they actually are overrepresented in fields like EMTs and emergency response services, where you have to be really smart, but you have to be able to be smart under pressure. And I think that's where ESTPs really, really thrive, because as much as we like to say that like INTJs are the masterminds, you put an INTJ in a high pressure situation. I'm not saying they couldn't be good in that, because they can learn. Anyone can learn and learn to evolve and adapt and things like that. But high pressure situations tend to not be the best place for INTJs to, exert their best thinking. They do better, like off in a cave somewhere where they can dwell on their thoughts, but an ESTP, these types really thrive under pressure. And the fact they often do their best work under this kind of chaotic situations. And it's something that I am completely astounded by, because it's not like me at all, but I really, really admire. And I don't know what the world would be like if we didn't have ESTPs. I can't imagine like what kind of chaos would ensue if we didn't have these people who could keep a level head when everything is just falling apart.
Yeah, I think that also we have to give them credit in the sense that they're usually the people who, when we have like a new thing like a self-driving car or like just anything that could be quote unquote dangerous, it's usually the ESTP that's like, all right, I'll be the test dummy to try it. And if we didn't have those brave people to actually like test out the parachute maybe, or to test out the self-driving car, or to test out like indoor skydiving, like all of these weird things, then we definitely would not be as far as we are right now, or it would probably come a lot slower as the rest of us spend so much more time like really like getting ourselves like pumped up to really try it. And the ESTP is like, all right, I'm just going to jump into it. And not only that, but then they'll figure out like, like how, like, hey, yeah, by the way, I figured this out too. Like as you're hang gliding, like you can also do this. And if you move your body in this type of way, then boom, boom. So that way you don't have to go and try it and then figure it out yourself. It's like, oh, I almost fell, but because of my quick responses, then I was able to do this. And I think that if you're ever about to fall, you should try this. Whereas like, maybe the rest of us, we probably would have just died. So, so I think that that's like another like really cool thing to have for the ESTPs. Like they really are like a lot of times like those daredevils. But again, it's not just about like, partying to like have fun and excitement. They can often be even confused for introverts, because they're so like laid back at times and lax. And SE is not about talking necessarily. Just like last week when I was talking about my ISFP acquaintance who would dance a lot at parties and everything like that. But I think of like Sonic the Hedgehog, not from the movies, but like if you watch like Sonic X, for example, he was not like a super talkative type of person. Usually you could find him just like relaxing, chilling, and like smiling, putting a thumbs up, like, hey, everything's gonna be all right kind of thing. But he was quick to jump into action. And he was always like ready to like have a thrill of his life, and that's where the SE like really showed up. So I think that like they get thrown into that like party animal thing a little bit too much, and it's true, but we should keep that like more well-rounded.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we've got some good comments from Mike McNeil, who's an ESTP, who's watching. And he was talking about how there's like a high percentage of high pressure special force operators are ESTP, ISTP. And, my husband used to be in the Air Force, and he actually went in for special forces, and then knew also a lot of other STPs as well there. It's amazing how many are in that particular field. And then also said, what is up here? ESTPs are definitely want to be heroes because they are great at physical confrontations in a crisis situation. Yeah, I think ESTPs today are maybe the ones who aren't in the military are like kind of waiting, disappointed because they're waiting for some kind of crisis or confrontation to show up so they can really like go all in and life just isn't giving it to them sometimes. I feel like life is pretty dull and sedentary for a lot of ESTPs, especially once they, reach like their 30s and 40s, when everyone's settling down and just kind of being more sedentary. I feel like there's kind of this dissatisfaction a lot of ESTPs face with, like, why aren't we actually like doing anything? So, all right. So next, should we move on to ENTPs?
Yes.
All right. So ENTPs, again, some similarities with ESTPs. They're great at troubleshooting. They're great at understanding how things work. They're great at, arguing and debating and like really helping you refine your thinking and helping rid you of convoluted or biased logic or logical fallacies and things like that. These types aren't necessarily the types that are like going to jump into action right away in the physical world and handle things like an ESTP. But I'm not saying they can't. They could learn to. That could be an acquired skill. But these types are the types, if you're having a crisis where you need an innovative idea, an outside the box solution to a problem, and it's more of an idea problem or a possibility problem, they're very helpful in that respect. I know a lot of ENTPs who are entrepreneurs. I think ENTPs love entrepreneurship, the ability to be their own bosses, to be free, to have their own life, and like to pursue things they love. And I found that they can come up with very innovative business solutions and ideas, and they can just generate them so fast. And sometimes I feel like with ENTP ideas in the business place, as well as their humor, they can just throw out so much so fast. Let me think. So I was around an ENTP recently, and he was constantly making jokes, like all the time. He was really smart, really funny, but it was like 20% of the jokes were not funny. They were just like, but because he was joking so frequently, it was like, of course, at least 50% of the time they're going to be funny. But it was just that he was doing it so much. And I feel like with the business ideas, it's the same with the ENTPs. Like, they throw out so many ideas. Some are going to be like half thought up and they're not really going to make sense. But then like the more they generate, the more great ideas they can create at the same time. And I think there's a lot of bravery in just being able to like do that kind of verbal brainstorming where you throw out all these ideas or you throw out all these jokes, and some of them aren't going to land, but some of them are. And sometimes that's just what you need in a crisis situation. That ability to think outside the box, to come up with solutions that aren't just something someone read in a book, that was written 10 years ago. You need someone who can evolve and work with changing variables and things like that. I think ENTPs are really good at that. I also like that you can get into really in-depth conversations with ENTPs. In my experience anyway, they can get really deep into abstract topics, and they can help you refine, like I said before, refine your thinking. If you're like, hey, I'm stuck on this religious topic. Everyone says this, I think this. An ENTP will very quickly and happily debate or argue that idea with you, not necessarily to win the argument with you, but to help you be able to get to the core truth of something. And ENTPs are all about finding out what's actually true. And so that debating, a lot of people see debating as like a mean-spirited thing. But for NTs, debating can actually be an act of love because it's showing enough of an interest in what you are saying or proposing or arguing that they're willing to meet you there and flesh out the idea in order to come to a place of truth. And I think that's something that ENTPs are really good at. And it's something that I appreciate as an INTJ, because there are a lot of times where it's like, oh, I really want to debate this thing. But I know like 90% of the people in my life would be offended if I tried to debate it with them. And that's really frustrating. Whereas I can see that an ENTP meeting me there and arguing about this with me to get to some level of truth that we both haven't been able to reach before. To me, that's an act of caring and connection. And that's something that I really appreciate. I think it's true that when, I think it was David Kiersey said that with NTs, they're looking for mind mates. SPs are looking for playmates and NTs are looking for mind mates. And I think that's absolutely true. I think that ENTPs, when they debate with you, when they argue with you, when they test your understanding of something by asking really piercing questions. It's a way for them of actually caring and connecting with you. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. They just go, oh, this person's being difficult, or they're being arrogant, or they're being they're just trying to start something just for the rush of it. And I don't think they always realize how much ENTPs are doing that, because they do want to help people have a better understanding of something. They do want to meet in that mental playground and connect through ideas. Mariama asked, was ESFP already covered? Yes, that was the first personality we talked about. So if you can move I think you can rewind.
Yeah, you can rewind here.
Yeah, you can go back to the beginning.
I was thinking of you, Mariama. You were one of the examples I had in my mind. So you should definitely rewind.
Yes, if you're joining now, we've talked about ESFPs, ENFPs, and ESTPs, and now we're on ENTPs. But if we've already talked about your type, just move it back, and you can catch up with where we are later. But those are my thoughts on ENTPs. What do you think, Denzel?
Yeah, I think that ENTPs personally are the most clever, witty types that I've come across. It's almost as if, even like, I have an ENTP nephew, and ever since he was young, like around like even 8, like 9 years old, like it was as if whenever I'd say anything, his response would be so clever, witty, whatever, that I would almost be like, bro, like, did you know I was gonna say this, and you've just been waiting, you've just been having this response in your back pocket to just timely throw that out there. And obviously, that's not the case, but I've seen that with so many other ENTPs, like even Antonia, and it almost adds even more like, okay, yeah, what they said was funny, but then how quickly they're able to respond to certain things is even more funny to me, because especially as an NI user, it's like, what? Like, how are you just so quick-witted in that way? So yeah, I think that they're like incredibly like clever and witty in that sense. I love how they're able to think outside the box, like really think outside the box. Having NENTI like that is amazing, because it's kind of like what we were saying about the ENFP, where the ENFP is almost like finding like new novel ways for us to live authentically. The ENTP is like finding like new novel ways for us to like think. When you said that they're very good at helping us calibrate our thinking, that's so spot on. Like, they really help us to refine the ways that we are thinking about certain frameworks, our opinions on certain things. Like, if you are really, really hell-bent on a certain political view or certain religious views, certain spiritual views, like whatever it might be, the ENTPs will really come like through and be the ones to like give you all of these. Like, when I think of devil's advocate, I'm thinking of ENTP. Like, they really are good at like I think Socrates was an ENTP, and he pretty much just went around not necessarily like spewing all of this wisdom, but showing how much we don't know by like probing and asking questions to the people who acted like they already knew everything. So ENTPs are really good at showing us how much that we don't know, and they also know how much they themselves don't know. But in knowing how much that we don't know, then we now have learned something, and they're really good at being able to continue to help us to learn more, which is why we have things like the Socratic Circle, because then it's like ENTPs, the more that they talk, Antonia Dodge, she'll tell you this herself, the more that they talk, then the more that they're also learning, because NE needs to be like generated, and it generates its own energy. And so as they're talking and they're hearing themselves talk, and then that's when all of a sudden the intuition starts like connecting, and then the TI is refining it in real time. And so then you'll be able to see like how they're making the connections, and they're also like, whittling it down to certain things that they're sharing, certain truths. I think of also, like when we look at even characters like from when we were younger, like early days, like Jimmy Neutron and stuff like that, like very imaginative minds that are like, wow, what if I created a jetpack and this, that, like they're tinkerers as well. And so now they try to like a lot of times like invent certain things. Like they'll have the ideas, and then they'll try and like actually like go and create whatever it is that they're thinking about that we might have never even thought like could actually exist or might actually even like happen. And yeah, there's just so much about ENTPs. Like they really analyze like so many different things in life, and they can speak about it in so many different ways. So yeah, I think that they're really fun too. Like they just want to get along. They also like to just have a good time. And they're incredibly intelligent. And they like to spar. They like to sharpen their like their mental abilities by sparring in that way. I was kind of a little bit thrown off because I think someone from Facebook said Frozen. I'm not sure if
Yeah,
they're
I'm
talking about
wondering.
the movie or if we're Frozen.
I know. I was just gonna ask that if anyone's watching and can give us like let us know if we're frozen for you as well. I guess if we're frozen, you wouldn't know because you wouldn't hear what we're saying right now.
Sure.
But actually, you know what? Let me check. I can just get onto Facebook on my phone and see if it looks like it's frozen for me. Hang on here.
Can everyone on YouTube see us?
Yeah, it's
Say I.
it's not frozen for me. So
Yeah.
hopefully it's not frozen for anyone else. If you're watching, let us know if it's frozen for you.
Right.
Because no one's responding, so we'll see. Hopefully someone will respond. I can ask my husband to check. He's got his headphones, his noise canceling headphones on.
Okay.
So he can't
He
check
cannot
right
respond
now.
in the
I'm
moment.
gonna text him. Be like,
Yeah.
make sure. Okay, there we go.
Jamila
Someone
says
said
it's
it's good.
not frozen.
Okay, phew. All right,
Yeah.
maybe
At least not on YouTube.
hopefully
Yeah.
Monica can refresh her screen or something. Maybe it'll work. All right, so yeah, we were talking about ENTPs, which gave me an inspiration for our next set of streams. I think we should do, because you're talking about fictional characters. You keep mentioning names. I'm like, we need to do a series of streams that's just us talking about fictional characters of each type.
That would be fun.
It would be fun. All right,
Yeah.
so let's.
Hanji, Attack on Titan, another ENTP in my opinion.
Yes, and she's
Yes.
also like, I absolutely adore her, and I think also Robert Downey Jr. I think as the actor.
Oh yeah.
I think he's ENTP also.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you want a couple examples, go watch Robert. If you want an example of an ENTP in action or talking, watch interviews with Robert Downey Jr.
Right.
So now let's move on to. Should we move on to ESFJ?
TJ. Yes.
Or TJ. TJ.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So that's easy. ESTJs. I feel like they are very, very vilified in the type community. I feel like people just like to think that ESTJs are these like they're gonna bash you over the head with the rule book, but they're also gonna be like evil dictators with some like murky scheme. I think that ESTJs are not at all like most of the time how they are vilified. I think that they are extremely hardworking people. They're very smart.
They're working hard to be villains. I'm sorry, go on.
It's so funny because all the ESTJs I've known have this like really strong moral compass. You know, because even though ESTJs are thinkers and they can be extremely blunt and sometimes tactless, and sometimes they might seem a little insensitive, they usually have a very strong sense of right and wrong. They do have inferior introverted feeling, and that does give them this kind of the dominant function and the inferior function make up the spine of self, essentially. So if you have an ESTJ, extroverted thinking and introverted feeling are a huge part of how they identify as a person. It's like, I'm somebody. ESTJs go through life thinking, I am somebody who can get things done. I am someone you can rely upon. I'm someone who is going to make sense. I'm also someone who is going to live by my convictions, someone who's going to, have this sense of right and wrong. And all the ESTJs I've known, and I think this is a very common ESTJ quality, is they not only will work extremely hard, they will not ask anyone to do something they wouldn't do themselves. We often talk about how extrovert thinking types delegate, and ESTJs are really good at delegating, but they're also really good at jumping in and handling things when life goes off the rails. And they often make a lot of sacrifices to make sure that their tasks get completed, that they show up on time, that they show up every day. These are the people who aren't going to call out sick for work because they're just having an off day. No offense to people who do that. I can get a tone, I suppose, when I mention that, but they're not gonna lie. There are people who call out to work or just don't show up or just don't try their best because they're just not feeling 100%. And sometimes for me, I'm like, okay, life, you're never gonna feel great all the time. But anyways, ESTJs are not people who do that, and I appreciate that about them. Like, they're gonna show up, they're gonna do what they said they would do, they're going to keep their commitments, they're gonna be responsible, and that's something I personally really love about them, partially because it aligns up with my personal values as well. But they are also really down to earth. They're not pretentious. I've never, as of yet, I haven't met a really pretentious ESTJ. They very practical, a lot of common sense know-how as far as like, here's how you can fix this problem. That sensing thinking types, STs, are just really good at practical common sense know-how that a lot of people, I mean, I can't even really call it common sense anymore because a lot of people don't use it. You know, how can I use this, load the dishwasher the best, most efficient way to fit as many dishes in there as I possibly can? You know, I mean, that sounds like a minutia or something like that, but it actually, you know, over time, you realize they know how to do all these practical things like 10% more efficiently than we ever do them. And if you add that all up, it makes a considerable difference in your life. Another thing I appreciate about ESTJs is they're usually very honest. They're just going to say what they think. They're not manipulators. At least not in my experience, they're not. They don't like beating around the bush. They don't like pretending something that they're not. That kind of honesty is something that I really appreciate about them. And they are also funny. I feel like sometimes the way that they like say their truth so tactlessly, but just like without even caring, like they don't, it's like, no, this is the truth, this is common sense, like you should just know this. But I also feel like people might think that their heart is really mean when they say that, but it's really not. I feel like it's funny. It's like if they respect you, they're going to tell you the truth. Like, it's not them trying to be mean. It's not them trying to like steamroll over people's feelings. It's like, hey, I respect you enough to just be real with you. And I find that with ESTJs and with most TJs, the minute they don't respect you is not when they're being blunt with you. It's when they're just being quiet. Because they're just like, there's no point in me even wasting my extroverted thinking on this person because they have they don't have no sense at all. It's just throwing my, what do they say, tossing my jewels before swine or whatever.
Tossing my pearls to swine.
Yeah. So if an ESTJ is being really blunt and seemingly tactless, it's not because they don't care about you or they want to hurt your feelings or they want to be jerks. Usually, either they're mad because stuff's not getting done, or they're just showing you the respect of being real with you. And that's something that I appreciate about ESTJs, how much they're able to just like say what they think, and that I can trust what they say 99% of the time because they're not manipulative. At least, like I said, from my experience, and I've worked with a lot of ESTJs, so I feel like it's a pretty good, sample size I'm thinking of. What about you, Denzel?
Yeah, ESTJs, they really stand on business. Like, they are very dutiful, they're very loyal. The first one that came to mind, again, I've been watching My Hero Academia. Well, I'm all caught up now, so it's actually sad because I'm waiting for the last season, so I haven't been watching it. But anyway, I was thinking of the class rep, Ida, I believe was his name. And he was very, very, like, people could say that he was very high strung, but the way that this man really stuck to his values, like, look, I want to be the best class rep for our class possible. I hold the responsibility to make sure that all of us are safe. I want to make sure that I'm making the best decisions that reflect everyone. Like, when they become like that, then that's really like the beautiful side of ESTJs. Now, the villainous side could be the hall monitor that just wants to become the hall monitor so that he can write people up. But then the heroic side is like the police officer who's like, man, I see how much bad is in the world, how much bad is even in the system, how much bad even other police officers are doing. And I don't like that. I want to be part of the system so that I can help actually be a good example of the system in that way. And they're very good at like working within that system, you know. ESTJs, they're also really good at knowing exactly like what always works and what always will work. I think again of Colette from Ratatouille. And I just always think of how she's like, she said, follow the recipe. And then she said that the original guy did something, something. And so then Linguini was like, oh, okay, so then do we just kind of like improvise? She's like, no, he improvised, we follow the recipe. And I know that like ESTJs, like a lot of times, like they get like a lot of like flack for it. For like, oh yeah, you know, ESTJs, they just want to be traditional and this is that. But I think that people often don't see like how much value is in tradition. Like, yes, if something is broken, we should fix it and we should be innovating all the time, but then we also need stability. Like if you did not record how exactly like you did XYZ last time, then how are you supposed to replicate it? And so there's a reason why we follow the recipe, because it's almost like somebody perfected it years ago after doing the trial and error so many times and doing all the ME. Like, oh, wait, we finally found the thing that works best. Let's record this so that next time we don't have to try 1,000 different ways before we get it right again. And so now we want to have that perfect thing. And so we're going to keep on going in that way. So when it comes to these types of systems, ESTJs usually have it like down pat. And they still have like enough extroverted intuition in that tertiary place to not be these like dry people. Like they have a lot of quirks. Like a lot of ESTJs are really like Star Wars nerds, and you wouldn't even know, because you know, like, or you probably do know, but then you're like surprised by it. They really are good at like making jokes. They really do like to have like a good time, and even though they are like responsible a lot of times, like really seem like, you know, sometimes like they can come off like anal towards certain people, they also really just love to have fun, and like they really love to like say certain jokes that maybe other people like would like kind of be surprised by, and just enjoy themselves in those instances. So yeah, I think that ESTJs also, yeah, they really do stand by their morals, just like Susan said, and they're very like value driven people despite it being like their inferior function.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think sometimes their values are tied into their introverted sensing as well. Like, you know, they're very protective of their traditions. They're very protective of like the experiences and beliefs they've grown up with that they still trust. It's not that they are just going to stick with their beliefs because they grew up with them and without question. But if they also trust them, it's like it's a combination, I feel like, of introverted feeling and introverted sensing, where it's like you cannot they will not depart from the way they were raised. Like they won't depart from the beliefs that they gathered when they were growing up, the ones that really matter to them. Now let's go on to ENTJ. So again, this is another type that's extremely vilified everywhere. You know,
working hard to be villains.
I think again, this is a type where you'll see a lot of evil. You know, you look up. I always think it's funny because like you Google like ENTJ fictional characters, and they're all like the worst sociopaths ever. I know we've talked about this before, but it's like Patrick Bateman and Lord Voldemort and the Eye of Sauron, and it's just like, wait, they just took these totally like these either psychologically like very disturbed people or the worst villains, and they just said, well, they want power, so there must be ENTJs. And I think I've seen that kind of shortcut to typing people is like, oh, if someone's power hungry, they must be an ENTJ. ENTJs are very ambitious people. They're very visionary people. They do set far-reaching goals and organize their lives in order to achieve them. Doesn't mean that they just want power for power's sake. Sometimes. I mean, climbing a ladder and going towards a goal is exciting, I think, for anyone, but particularly for people who have extroverted thinking. It's like, oh, I love being able to win at this. But that is not by any means all that ENTJs are about. Um, ENTJs, like ESTJs, do have values. They do have things they care about, and often they're willing to make great sacrifices and strides in pursuit of that. As an example, I know several ENTJs who they are highly successful, ambitious business people, but at the same time, they give a lot of money to charity. And they, that one of them works for Habitat for Humanity when they're not working hard for their business goals, they're working hard for helping other people for a cause that matters to them. These are the people that are not going to just take it easy in life and take the easy way out. They will work hard. They will put in the hours. They will put in the time, the blood, sweat, and tears to make their ideas come to life. And that doesn't mean that they want to be doing work all the time. Some people think, oh, ETJs, they just want to work all the time. That must be what makes them happy. Everyone gets tired. Everybody needs rest time. Everyone needs leisure time. Everyone needs friendship and things like that. But I often find that ENTJs, ESTJs, they will wear themselves out in pursuit of their responsibilities, in pursuit of their goals, in the pursuit of their vision, and even in the pursuit of to protect the convictions and values that are important to them. They will go 110%, 120% to try to make things happen. And that's something that I think is really admirable, because there's a lot of people who are just like, okay, I gave it 50%. I think that's good enough. I can check the box off. Yay, go me. And you're not going to run into that with ENTJs. They're not going to check off the box if they didn't actually do it. They also are very deep people. They can extract a lot of meaning from things that other people's might not find meaning in. They are intuitives. They have introverted intuition. And so they can have insights that can really surprise you about people and about situations, about patterns. And they can get really philosophical as well. I've noticed that a lot of people mistype as ENTJ. And one of the things that makes ENTJs stand out, which can actually help you sort out people who are mistyped ENTJs versus authentic ENTJs, is ENTJs have that intuition that makes them wonder about the big picture and these big questions in life, these big meaningful ideas. Like, why are we here? What's the point of our life? Is there, are there other galaxies in universes? And, these big questions, like what is morality? And how do we know what's good and bad? These big conceptual, big picture questions, ENTJs can get really into that kind of thing. I know a lot of ENTJs who love philosophy, who love poetry, who love anything that's going to spark their sense of wonder about the nature of the universe itself and like why we're here. And I think that you can have a lot of really amazing conversations with ENTJs about big, deep topics that you really can't broach with a lot of other people. And yeah, they're great for advice. If you're trying to overcome an obstacle, you just have to be willing to brace yourself, because some of their advice might seem really direct and really blunt, and they will tell you flat out if your idea isn't going to work, or if there's flaws in your plan, or, for example, if you're like, oh, I really want to lose 60 pounds. I just don't know why it's not happening. Like, I'm doing this and this. I'll be like, well, clearly I saw you eating at the New Year's Eve party. It didn't look like you were trying to lose 60 pounds. They might they might give you advice that seems almost insulting, but they don't mean it in an insulting way. They're just like, okay, if you want to reach this point over here on the map, your actions are showing that you're going the opposite direction. I'm going to help you by telling you how far off the course you really are, so that you can course correct and get yourself onto the right course. But some people can see that advice as just insulting, as just belittling. Like, well, why are you pointing out what I ate at the New Year's Eve party? What's wrong with you? I just want stuff like that. But they are really good at giving actually helpful, effective, well thought out advice, especially if it comes to some goal you want to reach and you're not sure how to reach it. They'll tell you how, but you just have to be willing to accept their truth and not vilify them because they are being direct with you and they're being honest with you. I see so many times where like thinkers get vilified because they're trying to help, and but then the other people are like, but you didn't say it nicely. And it's like to them they are saying it nicely. Like, why would they, to a ETJ, why would they waste your time beating around the bush to sandwich, like, to give you the help you need? I mean, that's ineffective.
To them, they are being nice, but they're not saying it nicely. They didn't think about saying it nicely. That's what I think it is.
Well,
but
they
it's
don't
not
even-
it's not them trying to be mean either.
Mhm.
It's just that, I didn't consider trying to say it nicely because me telling you is already nice.
Well, and also the way like a certain person would say it nicely would seem insulting to an ETJ. Like if you went to an ENTJ and you're like, hey, you've been doing such a great job with these tasks right here. I'm just loving it. But this one, they'd be really pissed off at you. They would just be like, why didn't you start with like, just tell me what's wrong. Don't waste my time. Don't give me this like.
And I think that that's so funny because then you could also go to the same one and be like, hey, by the way, I think you're doing it wrong. And then that could also probably piss them off. So now what do you do?
I mean, I don't know. Like, I don't know. In my experience with ETJs, this is, again, I can only go off as based like what I read in my own experience with working with the different types.
Mm-hmm.
In my experience, if you go to ETJs and you say, you're doing it wrong because X, Y, Z, if you give them some reasons, they usually are like, ah, cool. In my experience. Now, if you go to an ETJ and you're like, you're doing it wrong and it's not about a task. It's not about a goal. It's not about an impersonal thing, but you say you're doing it wrong with like a person.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're not being a nice person or essentially, or like you're, or you've hit on their inferior function essentially. Like if you go to an ENTJ and you say you're doing it wrong, but you're attacking like their introverted feeling, then they can get defensive and they can get upset because then they're like, oh gosh, no, I don't know what to do, like because that's an area that they feel more vulnerable. Mm-hmm. So that I don't know if that's like I think it depends on context, maybe, like because usually like with me it's like in the workplace I don't find like criticism being badly taken by ETJs, but like I also have a family member who's an ENTJ, and if it's a situation where there's an ENFJ in the family and she sometimes will point out how he's not being nice or how he's not like thinking about other people's feelings, then I notice him getting more like irritable and irritated at that kind of a thing.
Yeah, that's definitely frustrating for them.
So what are your thoughts though, Denzel, on the ENTJs?
Yeah, I love ENTJs. Like I really do. I love them so much. Even the villains. I really like them. Like when you think of, for example, Light Yagami, again, I know a lot of people think that he's INTJ. I respectfully disagree. Just like I believe that L is actually an INTJ. I said that last week. And I believe that Light Yagami is an ENTJ. And the whole Death Note show was like two NTJs playing like chess with each other. And even like when they're like playing soccer, tennis and everything, like Light, you see the TESEs, like, you can't just be defense. You also have to attack, so it's like, you kind of see that there. But anyway, I think that Light, he started off, not to spoil it for anyone. It's not a spoiler. It's really at the beginning. He wanted to his whole goal was actually to help the world. And I think that sometimes when we get the ENTJ villains, it could be like an ends justifies means kind of thing. It's like, yeah, I want to create a better world. So if I have the power to kill everyone who's bad, then why not? That's good, right? And so it's like, is that really an evil person? I also think of Paul Briggs from one of my top favorite shows. I think it's actually my favorite show. Yeah, Graceland. I always talk about it, but it's not a show that's commonly known. It's on Hulu if anybody wants to check it out. At least see the first season. It's like 12 episodes, 45 minutes each one. But it's about secret agents who all live in a house together and everything. And the top secret agent, his name is Paul Briggs. He's an ENTJ, my favorite ENTJ fictional character of all time. And you really see in that show like how an ENTJ can think. Like he's the boss, but he's very lax, he's very chill. He's so like cool, calm, and collected in a way, but he's keeping track of like everything that's going on. He's able to think on his feet. He has like enough of that SC tertiary to think on his feet. He's like managing a lot of different things. And even when he's doing things that are like morally questionable, like he's seeing like the bigger picture of like, okay, I feel like I have to do this in order to be able to attain this. Now, again, I'm not saying that all ENTJs think this way, but even when ENTJs are often villains, if they're a very well written villain, that's often like what's happening. It's like in my mind, I'm doing what is right because, and you have to kind of like do something that might be wrong in order to do what's right, in order to get this, and I have to be the one to do it. Another one that just came to mind was House of Cards. Frank Underwood.
Underwood.
Yes. Yeah. Like the very first episode, like he starts talking to the camera. You know, he's all cool. He's all nice and everything like that. And the next thing you know, like he walks over to the camera, like, because the dog is sick. And he's like, you know, these people, they don't have the heart to do this. So, and he kills the dog. And it's like, oh my gosh, he kills the dog, you know, but the dog was in pain. So he had to like go and like, and obviously he's not going to tell the people who might not understand, like, oh, the dog, I actually had to like put it out of its misery. So he's like, oh yeah, you know, the dog is dead, because they might, oh, you killed it, you know. So I understand them, I guess, maybe as a fellow ENJ, you know, again, the ones that like might be that way. But ENTJs, incredibly intelligent. They work so hard, and it's also often like for other people. They like FEs usually seen for like, you know, helping people all the time and everything like that, but ETJs really also want to help people a lot of times. Granted, they can also have less patience for people because extroverted thinking is about progress and it's about getting things done. So a lot of ETJs might think that they're introverts because they're like, no, people annoy me, people irritate me. But it's like, well, yeah, people usually irritate you because they get in the way of you getting things done, which is your dominant extroverted thinking function. And a lot of times, you know, they might think like, why can't people do things for themselves? And so, but they also are the ones who like, if you need help, like they will be there, like they will provide what you need. A lot of times, you know, like they're the types that like, man, you're in a tizzy, like they'll provide the money. Like, you know, like, hey man, I might not always be able to like speak all of the kind, affirming, kumbaya type of words, but here's some money that might actually be able to help you pay your rent this month and might be able to do this, and boom, boom, boom. That's pretty practical. And yeah, and here, you know what, here's a job, like I can go and talk to this person so they can like help you, so you can be able to get a job here, and then that can help you to continue to live your life. Again, it's not the kumbaya counseling type of words that maybe you wanted to hear, but it's something that's actually helping you get ahead. They might not have said it in the nicest way, but they're also not trying to be mean about it either. I think that also ENTJs are really, really good at seeing what's going to play out and being able to anticipate it. And for ENTJs, a lot of times it's more about creating the instances rather than just allowing them to like unfold like as is. And so I think that they're really good at like they know how to make what they want to happen happen. And I really respect that about them. So, but yeah, at the same time, there's also a lot of like very kind ENTJs. Like the first one that just came to mind was Jan from The Office, before she got really weird. But yeah, I think that she was like an example of a really kind ENTJ. Like, yeah, she was the boss and everything, but at the same time, like, you know, she was really kind to like the workers and everything like that. And a lot of ENTJs, especially ENTJ women, they get confused and think that they're NFJs, for example, because they actually are like a lot more kinder, a lot more nicer than the stereotypical ENTJ might be. So yeah, that's also to say that like not all ENTJs. There are ENTJs that are just very so business minded that they're just mean and everything. But there's a lot of ENTJs that are actually really kind, really nice, and they don't struggle with tact at all.
Yeah, absolutely. Having this conversation, it makes me feel more and more like we need to do that fictional character stream, because I've got so many fictional ENTJs that I want to talk about and I can't because of time.
Mhm.
But Mariama says, when I think of ETJs, I think of that give a man a fish versus teach a man to fish saying. They want to help you help yourself. And I would say that's absolutely true. And I would say that's for TJs in general. Like, rather than just helping you feel better, they want to help you fix the problem so you don't feel that way again. And, if you feel like a failure, well, they'll tell you how to not be a failure. They won't say, oh, you're not a failure. They'll say, hey, here's how you cannot be a failure. But absolutely, yeah, like teach you how to deal with the issue so it doesn't come back around to you again. Let's talk about ESFJs. We're saving best for last, ENFJs. But let's talk about ESFJs. So here's what I love about them. They are some of the warmest people I feel like you'll meet. Just as ESTJs are so focused on tasks and they are very much aware of what needs to be done action-wise and task-wise, ESFJs and ENFJs, but we're dealing with ESFJs, they are focused on people. What do people and the emotions going on with people and the needs, and not just the task related needs, but the emotion related needs that are going on with people. And so they think about, how can I take care of people's feelings right now? What is that person over there in the corner looks sad, this person over here looks cold, that person looks hungry, that person's drink is empty. Like, they're paying attention to all of that. And so when you're at it's no mistake that they're often given the moniker the host, or I think Dario Nardi calls them the friendly hosts, because that is often how they appear. They're very friendly and engaging, and they also tend to have a knack for hosting. Like, if you're at their house, they're going to notice if you look a little cold, or if your glass is empty, or if you look uncomfortable. They are going to try their best to make you feel at home. And they'll use warmth, they'll use empathy, they'll use quirky humor even. Again, ESJs, I do think sometimes get mistyped as ENPs because they have extroverted intuition, and it's an extroverted function. So it's going to show up in their communication. ESFJs can be very funny. They can be, off the cuff humor that you wouldn't expect. But they also notice and care about forming a connection with you and generating rapport with you, helping you feel like you are one of their inside circle. They're usually very polite. They're usually very tactful. They think about what they say and how it's going to impact people. And they try really hard to make sure that what they're saying is going to positively impact people, unless they're unhealthy, but we're not talking about those ones right now. And they're also practical. They've got that SJ practicality to them, where, I've seen a lot, like I talked last week about ISFJs in the medical fields. I've also known ESFJ nurses where they can be dealing with situations, whenever you're in the medical field, you're going to deal with gross situations. You're going to deal with people when they're not at their best. And I found that ESFJs are also really good at handling those situations, putting people at ease, helping them not to feel self-conscious, helping them not to feel embarrassed, or helping them to just feel a little bit more calm and a little bit more connected to someone who actually genuinely cares about them, who doesn't see them as just another number on a bed that they have to, check the chart and give the injection to, but someone who probably needs emotional tending as well. And I think that's something that we really need as a society, is people who can look at people and not just see numbers, but see them for the specific needs and emotions that they're dealing with in that moment. And I think ESFJs are really good at that. And that down-to-earth sensibility, of course, is amazing. If you ever, go to an ESFJ's house for like a holiday event or something like that, you'll notice that, at least in my experience, a lot of times, like, there's all these incredible details that they've noticed and that they've perfected, whether it's there's paper snowflakes cut out and hanging against the wall, or, the apple pie recipe that's been handed down by their great-great-grandmother, and they preserved it all these years. There's something to be said for sensing judgers and their ability to preserve these really special things from the past, and so that, it matters after all these years. You think of all the people that came before you and they did these little things that were meaningful to them, and then they pass on, and then it just gets lost so much. And one of the things I think is so special and important about sensing judgers is that they it's like they reach into the past and they go, we're not going to lose this. Let's commemorate this because it did mean something. And so then they keep bringing it back, even if it's just something small, like their great-great-grandmother's apple pie recipe. It's preserving that connection and tie to the past, and then hopefully other people preserving that as well. And it can be with little things or big things, but I think it's really important. And there's a question here from Karen. She says, or Kareem, sorry, who says, how does inferior introverted thinking affect ESFJs? That is a big question. So I'm going to briefly try to answer it and then hand the mic to you, Denzel, so you can answer as well. In my experience, there is this strong desire of ESFJs to be correct, to be accurate in what they're saying. And so sometimes they refrain from giving the full truth right away because they're afraid, like, what if it's something about it that's like just a little bit wrong? They enjoy things like Sudoku puzzles, and they enjoy like learning everything about a subject that interests them. They often have a knack for figuring out, like, if they like cooking, for example, they will like learn everything about a particular recipe, like how to make a pie crust just right, so that they can, understand the components and logic of cooking as a chemistry. But there is an apprehensiveness about just stating their opinion bluntly, because they do feel a little bit uncertain about whether or not their logic is 100% correct. And so even though ESFJs can have good logic, I mean, being a feeler doesn't mean you have bad logic automatically or anything like that. They can be so uncertain or insecure about their logic that they often will refrain from just stating these kind of opinions or logical truths, right, as fact, because they're worried about, what if they missed something really obvious and everyone else knows it, but they don't? Now they can state their opinions pretty decidedly, but those are just normally more of a social opinion, like, oh, we don't agree with the way this person did that. That wasn't kind. But if it comes to just like something logical, like, here's why the environment is being destroyed by cars, and they were trying to explain something like that, they might start getting really nervous about their logic and whether or not it was making sense. What do you think, Denzel?
Yeah, everything that you said, I agree with. I think that ESFJs are really like, so I actually responded in the chat saying, like, when I think of TI inferior, and even TI tertiary, a lot of times, like, I think of, I was just trying to protect you, so I think that that's like a lot of like where you can find that, like, like they know the truth of a situation, but then they're so hyper aware of how it's going to affect you or the group emotionally. It's like, we can't tell the citizens of the United States or whatever that XYZ is happening, because then they might become very, like, they might start freaking out in this way, and boom, boom. So we have to conceal it. We have to like do this. We have to do that so that we can keep the harmony. We can keep this, we can't tell so-and-so right now that he's adopted, because then he might start to freak out. And then he's going to start to think that maybe he's the black sheep of the family and his father didn't really love him, and boom, boom, boom. So it's best to just not tell him the truth about that, and etc. I'm not saying it's right, but it's just like, that's how the TI inferior can like often like think. A lot of times also they don't want to share certain opinions of theirs that they have. Like on Twitter, there's like certain tweets that, like that say something like, oh, I love when people tweet the opinions that I often think, but just never say. That way, if they're getting crucified for it, then it's like, yep, so I will never state that out loud. So that's like a lot of like that TI inferior. It's almost like if an ESFJ really trusts you, ESFJ or ENFJ, then you start to see their TI. It's like, okay, I know that everybody in society thinks this about XYZ, but I actually think this. Like, that's when like, oh shoot, like, okay, like you're really like in it, like you're really like trusted in that way. So that's one of the many ways they can show up. And lastly, like TI inferior, like which then this all goes into like why ESFJs are awesome. TI inferior like is really big on breaking things down to the smallest bite-sized pieces. And because they often know like, okay, I had to break this down into such granular ways, I understand more than anyone like how hard it is to take in all of this information. And so now I want to be able to have the patience to teach other people in the same way. So now, like, if you look at certain books, like How to Do XYZ for Dummies, that's probably a TI inferior type who wrote that, because it's like they really don't have a problem with being like, yeah, now you do it like this and boom, boom, because that's a lot of times how they learned it. Whereas, like, yeah, I guess, yeah, I'll just leave it at that. So with ESFJs, they definitely can be confused for ENFPs a lot of times, and sometimes even ENTPs. They have the same functions as an ENTP, because that NE tertiary can come out like really well. But also a lot of times, you know, they can be confused for a lot of different types because they're not always the ways that we might think that they are. Like I know, for example, I stereotypically thought that The Rock was an ESTP. Like I was, oh yeah, of course, you know, like who else would get that big and boom, boom. And then I was actually doing like a project, and I was looking for an ESTP example. So I started looking at interviews of The Rock so I could use him as an example. And as I watched the interviews, I'm like, this guy's an FE Dom, and I don't think that it's ENFJ. I think it's actually ESFJ. And then it starts like make sense too. Like he starts talking about like how like, yeah, you know, when I was younger, like my dad was into wrestling. So his father was probably like SE dominant or something like that. And his father was the one who got him into wrestling and working out and all of that. And it pretty much got into his SI. Like now it's just like a routine. Like, yeah, just work out in this way. And like, and it's almost like in memory of his father. And so now like he kind of like lives through that in that sense. But he's so extra kind and like soft and gentle and stuff like that, despite like his appearance and even some of the roles that he might play. He has a lot of jokes, you know, and, you know, I think of like other ESFJ characters like Josh from Drake and Josh. I think that he was a really good example of an ESFJ. I think of Danny Tanner from Full House, another great example of an ESFJ. ESFJ men at that, because a lot of times like we see ESFJ women and we think like, yeah, you know, the stereotypical mom, you know, stuff like that. And FE can just seem like a feminine type of thing. But like when you look at these men, like you can see how they're really like shepherding like the household and everything. They're really like catering to a lot of people. So ESFJs in general, both like the men and the women, they're really good at being able to host. They're keeping track of, like Susan was saying, like, oh, you know, like this person needs this sustenance, or this person needs this person needs that. They're really great at helping you in a practical way. They can say the kind things to you, and they're really like, you know, affectionate in that sense, but they will really focus on helping you in a practical manner. Like they will cook for you, you know, they will watch your children for you, you know, they will do this, they will do that, so that that can be what like actually helps you, rather than just like saying a lot of things to get into your soul and really like help you to recover that.
Those are great examples, Denzel. I agree with you on all of that, everything you said. Yeah, it's funny because I knew a couple different ESFJs that I went to church with growing up, and I felt like they always had a bag of candy in their purse.
They do.
But they'd always like hand it out to all the kids around them, like, here you go, here's yours, here's yours. I don't know. I'm not saying that's like a total ESFJ thing, but it's an example of like how they think about other people. It's like, I'm going to put this candy in my purse. And it was like, I don't even know if they ate the candy, but they always actually... I was thinking about it. I know like 4 ESFJs who always brought candy to church and to pass out. And like, I don't know, maybe that's, you know, I don't know. But it's something that I notice, and I think it's kind of cute about them, about that caretaking ability that they have.
Mm-hmm.
Now let's talk about ENFJs, Denzel's type. And I feel like we had another ENFJ on here as well. So hopefully she's still here. I think she was the one who was saying it was frozen, Monica. Let's talk about ENFJs. So ENFJs, where to begin? I always feel like I'm repeating when we're talking about, we go from like a type who shares the dominant function to another type with it. But ENFJs also have that same really strong warmth that they bring to situations. Like you feel wanted when you're with them. You feel like they want to be with you, and they're actually putting themselves out there to make sure you know it. And as an INTJ, that's something I really appreciate, because for me, what they do would take in a huge amount of like bravery. Like for me to go up to someone and be like, hey, I'm so happy to see you, and give them a big hug and like be really responsive and everything, that would take a whole lot of energy. But ENFJs just do it naturally. And I think it's incredible that they can bring so much warmth to people, to make them feel unified with other people, to make them feel not alone. And ENFJs also have this ability to connect with people using common values that maybe we don't even realize are common values. I think Martin Luther King Jr., an ENFJ, did that when he talked about what we as humans all have in common. But then he used these shared values to highlight the importance of the civil rights movement and the importance of racial equality and things like that. He highlighted what we all share. So he was connecting with not only his his proponents and the people who believed in him, but he knew how to connect to the people who weren't on his side as well, by recognizing that they also have values, that they also have things that matter to them, that he shared, and by bringing those to the forefront to explain how we shouldn't treat other humans this way, that we should treat people with the dignity that they deserve, because we're all humans. And I think that's something that ENFJs are really good at, is recognizing what all people have in common and appealing to those shared values to get people on the same page and to extinguish useless conflict and useless fighting, where people are picking on one tiny, there's a tree of goodness, and some people will just pick on one tiny branch and be like, I don't like you because of this branch over here. And an ENFJ outside of the situation can be like, but you agree with these branches over here. Like, why can't we focus on what we agree on and help use that to bring us closer together and to help us be more unified and to make the world a better place? Why are we fighting over this one little twig, And I think ENFJs are really good at that. They're amazing communicators as well. I know even just in the live streams that I've had with Denzel, like you have been really great at bringing up these incredible metaphors that I never thought of before, and drawing these connections between things. I think they're really powerful communicators. If you look at famous ENFJs, and again, I haven't typed these people, you have to take it with a grain of salt, but I think that, Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King Jr., Oprah Winfrey, there's so many others, Morpheus from The Matrix, if you want to talk about like a fictional character, really powerful communicators. And I think that's something that when ENFJs are living up to their potential, they will use their skills at communication to draw people towards their potential. I think that's something that, Linda Behrens, who is a PhD psychologist, calls intuitive feeling types catalysts. And I always think of that word with ENFJs. I can't think of the word ENFJ without thinking of catalysts, because I feel like they can see people's unique potential because they're intuitives. Not that sensors couldn't see potential, but they have that NJ ability to spot patterns, to spot and to predict things. But they also have that emotional intelligence where they can see people's unique emotional capability and the values that matter to those people, and they can catalyze them towards the path they really need to be going on, and they can really move them in the direction that will give them a lot of meaning and purpose and fulfillment in life, which is why I think ENFJs make excellent therapists. I think they make excellent life coaches. They're just great at seeing hidden potential in people and in situations, and they're great at using their skills of communication to get people motivated to go in the direction towards their potential. So let me look at my notes, see if I missed anything, because I'm like get on the spot. They're very tactful. They're curious about people. Some people, when you're with them, they're so busy talking about what they have to say, you can tell that you're just invisible. Like, you are just a receptacle for their feelings and for their life. And I feel like with ENFJs, they actually care about what you have to say. They're not going, yes, they can be very talkative people, but they aren't just going, you're not just going to get stuck in a one-sided conversation unless they have some cluster B personality disorder or something like that. Like, you're not going to get stuck in a one-sided conversation where you are just their dumping ground for all their thoughts, but you are like almost a non-entity to them. And I've encountered this a lot, especially as the world has gotten more and more disconnected and people are more and more attached to their phones and to getting likes and to feeding their ego with things like social media and stuff like that. I found that I run into more and more adults who don't know how to see the other person on the receiving end of a conversation as a human. Like, they just see them as, here, let me dump my life onto you and then walk away. And I see that so much, and it really, really bothers me. But I have noticed that ENFJs are very unlikely to do that. Like, they actually care about what you think about specific concepts. About, like, I know, Denzel, you're interested in like platonic intimacy and relationships and different types of relationships and friendships and what it all means. And like, you actually care what other people think about it and where they're coming from. And that ability to make to care what someone else has to say can make someone feel extremely seen and valued. And it's just so nice, it's very rare to find as well. So those are just some of the many things that I appreciate about ENFJs. I could say more, but I am wanting to hear what you have to say, Denzel.
Yeah, from the ENFJs that I know and the ENFJs that I've like seen on like in fictional like shows and everything like that, I think one of the consistent things that I've seen is a desire to really bring people. I really like what you said about how focusing on what we all have in common and bringing that together. I think that ENFJs that I've known, like they're really like big on connection, depth of intimacy, depth of connection, leading with FE as a dominant function and then also having NI as the auxiliary to back it up. They look underneath the surface for like, okay, yeah, we're connecting, but like, what's the depth behind it? Like, how can we make this even more? And they see relationships as a third entity. Like, I personally like to see them as like, okay, me and you, we've now created a metaphorical child, And so if we're going to create this child, like, can I be a present enough father for our child here? Or do I have too many children that it's like, hey, I won't be able to tend to this child. So in that case, I cannot metaphorically procreate with you, like as in like have this relationship with you in this way. And so I think that like another way to put it is like they're very tapped into the flame that's like dwindling. Like there's a lot of personality types that, they can go very long without like, talking to you or talking to each other and everything like that. A lot of them are proud about that. And that's fine, but then I feel like for ENFJs, they're usually like the types that are like aware of like, okay, like this flame is starting to dwindle, and they know the exact type of like firewood to be able to throw into the flame to like help bring it back up. I think that also ENFJs are like they often are like leading society. Like a lot of times like, oh, FE, like they're like all about the social norms. I personally think that ENFJs are the ones that like kind of create a lot of the social norms that we're seeing. And it's like, okay, now that we have established like Black and white people should actually be able to interact and all of this, what's the next way that we can get humanity as a whole to be able to like move forward in being able to connect with each other? Like the better that we're able to connect with each other, then the better that we'll be able to actually have like a lot of problems like solved. Like when we think of like world peace, it's like, okay, obviously if I actually had love for you, then I would actually want to feed you as a homeless person. If I had love for you, I wouldn't try to nuke your whole entire country. If I had love for you, then maybe because of our rapport, then if you hurt my feelings, then I'm not going to go back and just seethe about it and try to have some sort of like vindictive way of getting back at you. But I'll come and talk to you about it and we're going to try to like actively work out our differences so that we can compromise, because I care enough about our dynamic, and I believe that you also care enough about our dynamic, so that we can come to like an agreement. I think that also ENFJs are really good at being able to see the demons within people and then appreciating it. Like I think of Tanjiro from Demon Slayer, the anime, and it's such a beautiful anime because he really sees the backstories behind these demons. Like I think that ENFJs are able to see like the inner child. Like, yes, this person is evil, or this person is bad, or whatever, or seen as bad, but man, how did they get here? Oh wow, I see. And they're able to, that they have the patience to be able to go into that person's like mind and heart and speak to that inner child a lot of times, to be able to bring them back to that person and allow them to be able to like, rework all of that, or just have like some sort of like sympathy or empathy for them. And yeah, I think that that's one of the biggest things, being like a mentor and a coach for people to be able to become their best selves, because the vision is, the better that we all are as individuals, then the better that we will be as a society. If I can work on myself to be the best version of myself, to be an embodiment of love, to be able to forgive, to be able to communicate effectively, to be able to do this, to be able to do that, then I will now make society everywhere that I go just that much better by being there. And if I can help other people to do the same thing, then imagine how much more cohesive our society would be. And then we can actually get a lot more work done. It's a lot easier to work at a job where everybody's actually getting along. Hey, oh man, like I'm sick. So can you please like take my shift tomorrow? Well, if you don't have like rapport with that person, then it's going to be very easy for you to just cut that off. Like, no, I'm not going to help. And now the job is suffering. But if everybody really sees it's like, hey, we're a family, we're a team, which a lot of times, that's kind of like forced now. Like it's like a stigma, like, hey, if a job says like, yeah, we're like a family here, then run away, And I think that's because it's like, it's forced in those instances. But it's one of those things where it's like, you don't have to say it. People will like feel it. And if you feel like you're like family at the job, then it's almost like work isn't even work anymore as much, because you actually feel like, oh, like you spend so much time here, so you may as well like connect with people and etc. So I think that ENFJs really try to cultivate, all in all, like how can we better our society? How can we better our interactions with each other? How can we look at the nuances of how we're interacting and then continue to ameliorate that?
Thank you, Denzel. I think those are some great examples. And yeah, I love that you brought up the whole, we're a family, we're a team. Because I think that TJs try to do that sometimes, but it's just not it's like, okay, the rule book says we should do this. Okay, everybody, we're a family, but do your job, please, or else I will disown you. Yeah, there's so much that it's fun talking about these types and just focusing on what we love and our personal experiences, because there's so much like bias in any community. You go into any community, there's gonna be bias, and in the type community, it's no different. And there's so many people who have, oh, if you're a sensor, you're really dumb, or if you're a feeler, you're not logical, or if you're a thinker, you're a bad guy. There's so many stereotypes that go around, and there's so much judgment, and there's so much like people just using their type to feel superior. And I think if there was only one thing you could take away from this stream, and as well as last week's stream, it's that each of these types has so many incredible things they bring to the table. I mean, if you look at your own life and you think of all the people you know and all the great experiences you've had with different people, I'm sure you could give us so many examples as well. If you have examples of types that you've had great experiences with, leave those in the comments for us to read, for other people to read. We need to hear these examples, because there's like a multitude of voices, for example, that are speaking up about INFJs. I love INFJs, and they need those voices because there's so few INFJs in the world, and they often find it hard to find their people in real life. But in the type community, you don't have a lot of people speaking up about the great qualities of, ENTJs or ESTPs or ESFPs, things like this.
ESFJs, yeah.
ESFJs, yeah, absolutely. And so because there's not all these voices, then these stereotypes show up, where you get the ESFJ, who's the meddling mother who's just like their whole life is just about gossip or something like that. Or you get the ENTJ villain. Again, ENTJs are also like, there's not that many that, I've found in the type community. And so, wherever you have a lack of voice, there's also a openness for these stereotypes, harmful stereotypes to abound. So if you have good experiences with any of these 8 personality types, leave an example in the comments or in the chat. I know we're going to be ending the stream soon, but leave an example in the comments because we need those examples out there. And I absolutely think that our next stream, I'm going to talk to Denzel, but maybe we'll do highlight the 16 personality types, but in fiction, like in movies or books or TV shows, things like that. That might be a fun way to show different examples of how the types can show up. So I want to say thank you, Denzel.
Then just be sure to email me at denzelmensa94@gmail.com, and we can figure out a different time. I just can't leave everything 24/7, but I know that people have different time zones and stuff like that. So just let me know there. I also have a YouTube channel that you can check out at Denzel Mensah. That's my name on there. And yeah, I also offer coaching. So if you already know what your personality type is, but you want to become a better version of your personality type, then yeah, I would be happy to help you. If you just want to even chop it up, you have questions about type or just anything in general, just oh yeah, I watched this video and I just wanted to talk to you deeper about it. Schedule coaching sessions. I do relationship coaching as well, with you and your partner, you and your grandchildren, whatever it might be. So yeah, there's a lot that I've run into with that. Yeah, just thanks for having me, Susan. I appreciate it.
Thanks for being here. You always bring such great metaphors and insights to discussion, and I really appreciate it. And I also want to say thank you to everyone who came here and was part of this stream. Thank you for being a part of it. I know we had lots of great feedback from so many people, and Mike, Mariama, Monica, Kibo, thank you so much, Tori. I really appreciate all of you being here for this. I know everyone has really busy lives, and to make time for 2 hours of me and Denzel talking is always an honor. So thank you, and join us next week. The topic is not set in stone yet, but we'll probably be talking about a fictional character of fictional characters of a certain type. We just have to settle on the type, and we'll let you know. But thanks again, and I hope you all have a wonderful new year. Bye, everybody.